This is Alicia, and welcome back to the Eat Me podcast. We are at the end of June. I can't even believe that we are already here. And it would only be fitting for me to continue on talking about the LGBTQ community. Obviously I'm a part of this community. So, there's that. But also this month, I wanted to highlight certain things that are quote unquote eating at me. And so last week I talked about how the religious components of my life affected me. And this week, I really wanted to talk about something that a lot of people in the queer community, or at least amongst Black queer folks that I've spoken to, something that we talk about a lot, and that is the racism and the prejudices that we experience being in this community. The Black queer experience versus the white queer experience or the Asian experience or anyone's experience is obviously all different, right? But when it comes to the racism that we've experienced and that we see in this community, it's wild to even think that is a thing, because when you think of, or what you know, or at least what I would think of when I think of this community or my community, I would think that we would all be on one accord, given that we share um, common, you know, issues that are presented in everyday life. Our government and different legislation are attempting to, you know, ban marriage and just erase us altogether, particularly when it comes to trans people and things of that nature. So it's really, really challenging when we get to this point and start talking about how we address, or how we can address, confront, however you want to say that, this particular topic. The majority of things that you see in media as it relates to the pop culture of the LGBTQ experience traditionally derives from Black queer folks. And so it's hard to see these things come into the mainstream, knowing that someone that is bringing it to the mainstream a lot of times is a white queer person, or a white person who has seen a Black queer person do certain things. And so they feel like, oh, let me make this popular. It's difficult. And it's also difficult to be in spaces where you are the only Black queer person, or you are the only Black or the only person of color that's queer in those spaces. So it's very uncomfortable a lot of times, especially when you're in these spaces and these topics come up, and a lot of times you're the only person there, and you have to be the one to defend yourself and defend the community as best as you can. I mean, you're not here to, the savior of all queer people, but it is a thing, and I wanted to talk about it today. So I found an article, because y'all know how I roll. I found this article, and it's called Black and White: How Race Impacts Our Queer Experience. And it was written by Darnell Richards. And Darnell, basically what I was just saying, it breaks down a lot of what this experience looks like for the person of color in the LGBTQ community. It was something that I really thought was interesting. So in this article, he starts out by saying, the community is what LGBTQ, the acronym, is meant to represent. It's a group of people ostracized by society coming together to create a safe space. But even in our space, our experiences differ. And the impact of that the Black queer community has had on popular queer culture is undeniable. From the New York ballroom creating the groundwork that launched the drag into the heart of pop culture, Marsha P. Johnson leading the Stonewall riots, one of the first monumental moments in queer activism and visibility. So he goes on to say that our contribution is refutable, yet we are not regarded with the same desire as those who are white and LGBTQ plus. With online dating and media representation, the voyage through life as Black and queer is something uniquely shared through our experiences. He goes on to talk about something that I thought was really interesting, something I didn't even know about. So he says this, he says, there's a phrase commonly used, particularly among gay men, and it says that the phrase is no fats, no femmes, and no Blacks or Asians. Now, this was originating from the dating app Grindr. which maybe that's why I don't know about it because I was not on Grinder. It's normally, like I said, that's a app traditionally for gay men and trans women, from what I know. And basically, he says this in this article as well. Um, and like I said, it was originated from Grinder, and it was and is, he says, frequently used by white members to deter people who didn't fit their preference from messaging them. Grinder itself has a multitude of unethical and immoral aspects, nonetheless. It serves as a lot of queer men, and trans women's first exposure to the community. For the closeted young adult, it is an introduction to other queer people. And I thought that was really interesting because I was like, wow. I mean, I guess it's one thing to say, hey, these are my preferences, but to really just be like, no fats, no femmes, no blacks or Asians. I mean, it's really jarring to me because from what I've experienced with a lot of gay men, and not all, I'm not saying all, there are body image concerns, right? And so this would make sense in some ways because it's like this would then perpetuate more of a body image issue, especially if you're someone that's a little, on the heavier side that wants to date. And you're already struggling with your body image, and then seeing something like that would then cause more harm. Or even on the other spectrum of it, like you are someone who is, really striving, or not striving, but just like working hard, whether it be in a healthy way or an unhealthy way, to maintain a quote unquote thin physique, and you're constantly trying to meet this mark that is potentially causing you a lot of stress and angst. So I just thought that was so interesting that that is something that is put out there. And I mean, not to like make this, so negative on the LGBTQ side of things, because other apps, I'm pretty sure, have their actual things that they say, and what people say, and are hurtful and not supportive of people on an app. So I don't want it to be a thing of like, oh, it's just the LGBTQ plus community with their dating apps that are doing things like this. But I just thought that was really, I was like, wow, I had never heard of this. Like I said, I'm not on Grinder, so that could be another reason why. But I was like, wow, like that's a thing. Interesting, right? He goes on to say, being black and on Grindr is something indescribable. Labels such as BBC, which of course regards to a black man's genitalia size, or black femme, which refers to black trans women. Grindr exposes marginalized groups to unsafe environments and increases the chance of its members being fetishized. I can't talk. Fetishized. Okay, y'all know what I'm saying. Clearly, my mouth is not working today. In 2018, the hashtag Kinder Grinder, a campaign to promote equality on the app, was launched. But a lot more needs to be done. Measures need to be put in place to consider people of color, assures them of their safety, and lets them exist in spaces without fear and fetishization or prejudice. And, maybe it's because I'm just not out in just out in the community like that anymore, or I'm dating, like I'm not dating, or I'm not a queer man or trans person, or trans woman rather, in these spaces. So to me, this was all new to me. I had no idea that it was this cruel when it came to the dating scene, and how it was approached on this particular app. He goes on to talk about other things as it relates to black trans people, which I thought was really interesting. So he goes on and he says this: the black trans woman, the most marginalized members of the LGBTQ plus community, have contributed to some of the greatest assets of queer culture. In 2021 alone, 45 trans people, mainly black and Latinx, were murdered. The Black trans community has higher rates of crime against them and rarely receives protection or help from law enforcement. Now, I need to look this up, y'all. So give me 1 second. There is, and I just don't want to say this person's name incorrectly. So give me 1 second. So I want to make sure I'm pronouncing this correct. So I think it's La Beja. So the Royal House of La Beja is the first house of the ballroom founded by Crystal LaBeija and Lottie LaBeija in 1968. So Pepper LaBeija, the renowned mother of the House of LaBeija, and hopefully I'm saying that right, was a trans woman and drag queen who soared in the ballroom scene. And so in this section of the article, talking about the trans experience in terms of like the ballroom scene and how this particular part of time as it relates to the LGBTQ plus community, the ballroom was everything. And I remember when I first came to New York City and I went to a few balls and it was something like you would never, it's just one of the most exciting things and hilarious and entertaining and all the things. Ballroom scene really created a lot of things like house music and voguing and a lot of the different slogans and slang that is pretty popular. It all comes from that particular scene. And so, like I said, Pepper LaBeija, and like I said, hopefully I'm saying that right, the renowned mother of the House of LaBeija was a trans woman and drag queen who soared in the ballroom, winning around 250 trophies and taking homeless queer youth off the New York streets. However, her name was nowhere near as popular as another drag queen who was out at the same time, Divine. And so Divine, at the height of their popularity, started movies and theater, even having international music success from their songs "I'm Beautiful" and "Walk Like a Man." And you might be thinking, "Who's Divine?" Divine, you might know, you might already know, but those who might not know, if you've seen the show, the movie Hairspray, Tracy Turnblad's mom, that is Divine, the original Hairspray from when Ricky Lake played Tracy Turnblad. That is Divine. And so Divine definitely made a name for herself. John Waters, who was the director of Hairspray, and also the one of the other films that Divine was in, and it's slipping me right now. He really put Divine out there as it relates to the main screen. And I mean, like I said, also these songs that Divine did as well were, a part of their fame. So goes on to say both are legends. However, only one ever got respect and popularity they deserved by popular culture. Divine was crowned drag queen of the century. LaBeija remained an underground legend until Paris is Burning was released, a documentary that follows ballroom culture and the spearheads. Goes on to say the biggest of queer media is RuPaul's Drag Race, and all the branch off series all originate from ballroom. Having been started by Black drag queen and the basis of the show coming from the Black queer spaces, you would think that Black visibility and representation on the show would be high. Conversely, white drag queens have been able to use the platform they were given to elevate and commercialize their success, whereas Black queens must suffer at the hands of racism from fans and even fellow challengers. And it's so interesting when you think of these things because it's like the origins of a lot of things as it relates to the LGBTQ plus history and experience have been spearheaded or created by either a Black person or someone of color. I mean, for me, it's really hard for me to, and I shared this in a episode before where I was saying, now for me going to Pride and stuff like that, it's hard for me to go, especially when you see how whitewashed it is and commercialized it is, and it's like this is not what this actual movement and protest is about. And yes, we can celebrate it, but it's like understanding the history behind it and honoring that history. I feel like that has been completely dismissed. And it's hard when you're there to just participate, knowing that the people who started this, do they acknowledge them to some degree? Yeah. But to really cultivate the culture of why this was started, it's lost upon a lot of people, and it's heartbreaking when you think of that, and it's heartbreaking to know that a lot of the experiences of the Black and brown queer person is just completely dismissed in many ways, and I love that this article points that out in so many ways. Goes on to say this, and it says, "This is the Black queer experience," right? In spaces that we fought to create, we aren't esteemed the same. The next time you scream, yes, or bitch, remind yourself it comes from the lexicon of Black drag queens. The house music you're dancing to at the club derives from the Black queer DJs and the sassy attitude you emulate for comedic purposes, fashioned from the supposed negative caricatures of Black women. If our culture can be assimilated into the popular queer culture, so should the community that brought this vibrant culture to life. The experience should be the same on both ends of the spectrum, regardless of race. As members of the LGBTQ plus community, we are already shunned by society. Why ever shun those in our community? That's the end of the article. I loved, it's very concise article, and I figured this actual episode would be very concise because I mean, how much more can you say when it relates to this? I mean, obviously, if I had someone else, like if we had a panel, we could definitely talk about other things as it relates to the differences of the queer experience for the Black person versus the white person. But it is like nails on a chalkboard when you do hear, at least for me, this is just me. Everybody else, you have your own uh way of dealing with things or being okay with it or whatever. But it is like nails on a chalkboard for me when I hear white people or just other people in general or white cis people, straight people, say things like yes or bitch. And I'm just like, but then in turn not support Black people or say little things that are, undermining or like I said, just not supporting Black folks at all. And it's like we are good enough to create culture, right? But we're not good enough to date or to support or to elevate. It's wild to me. It's wild. And at the same time, it's not surprising. I mean, we've been experiencing this for a very long time. And so, wrapping this up this week and ending Pride Month, my hope is that not just LGBTQ plus white folks, but white folks in general recognize that Black people have created lots, actually, the majority of pop culture that you see in this country and even around the world. And for you to just take that culture and use it in the way for your personal gain is just it's hurtful and it's aggravating in so many ways, especially when it's not being referenced in a proper way. When I think of that type of use of who we are and how we do things in our creations, I think of when I was, in college, my undergrad, even up to my doctoral experience. And I remember when we were writing, papers and, different things of that nature, the emphasis on plagiarism. And I feel like a lot of what we see in the LGBTQ plus experience and just in this American society and even on a global scale is that the plagiarism of Black culture is just the norm. And my hope is that somehow, some way, that plagiarism will be called out and those who are plagiarizing in an academic sense, I'm thinking of it that way, will be expelled from the utilization of something that was created by others and those who are not receiving that credit. Like I don't understand how we are still in a space where we're still creating and thrive well, we are thriving. Black folks are always we're thriving in our own way, which I love. I love the fact that we are able to just thrive despite it all. It would be better if we were thriving in the way where we are thriving without all the barriers, but that's a whole other story. But I want to get to a point, or I would love for us all to be at a point where the plagiarism of the Black LGBTQ person and just Black folks in general is called out and not only called out, but we are actually acknowledged for this work. So yeah, my charge is for those white folks and for folks in general, whether you be a person of color that is not Black or whoever, that you acknowledge that the majority of the things that you do, say, and how you operate comes more times than not from a Black person. And acknowledge that and recognize that and celebrate that. Celebrate it. Celebrate the fact that this unique way that we do things has afforded you the ability to be out and express yourself in ways that you may not have been able to actually put together on your own. That is my challenge to you all. For those of you all who are going out for Pride here in New York City in particular, please be safe this weekend. Have a good time. And if you see a Black queer person, don't be weird. Don't be weird, and don't make them feel like they don't belong. Because if it weren't for our actual elders in this community, the Black and brown folks, people of color of the queer community, a lot of things would not be what they are today. So yeah, I love you all. And hey, the next time we will be talking is in the month of July, which is mind blowing to me. I can't believe this summer is just passing us by. Happy Pride, y'all. Happy Pride. I am so proud to be a part of this community. I'm proud to be a Black queer person. I'm just so excited for what is to come in, the height of all of the things that are happening in this country and across the world. I feel like we are in a good place to raise our voices and to remain hopeful in times where it seems like there is no hope. So there's that. But yeah, happy Pride, y'all. And to all my Black queer people, I love you. And listen, we are the main components of this fabric. So hold your heads high. Know that you are seen, you are loved, if not by anybody, by me. So yeah, like I said, happy Pride, y'all. I love y'all. And thank you for listening to this week's episode of the E to Me podcast. I'll see y'all next week. All right.